Hello everybody and welcome to my world. So for today's video, I have a makeup tutorial for you on this look right here. This is something that I would recreate if I was heading out on New Year's Eve. However, based on these circumstances right now out there in the world, probably will be staying in this year. But in any case, if you do enjoy this makeup look and you want to see how I did it, just keep on watching. So the first thing I started off with after washing my face is this Clarify Facial Mist by Valjean Labs. It contains vitamin A and witch hazel, and I just sprayed it on my face and let it air dry. Then on top of that, I went in with some moisturizer. I used this one from CeraVe, and usually I would apply sunscreen at this stage as well, but since this look is for New Year's Eve, it would be completely dark outside by the time I leave the house to get wherever I'm going, so today we're going to skip that step. And getting into the makeup, I went in with the CoverGirl True Blend Undercover Concealer in Warm Honey and just used it to prime my eyelids. Then to set the concealer in place, I used the Maybelline Fit Me Loose Finishing Powder in 35 Deep, and I also like to really focus it in on my eyebrows as that area gets oily very easily, and I just like to mattify it as much as possible before I fill in my brows. For my brows, I am using my go-to, which is the Annabelle Brow Pencil in medium brown, and this is pretty much the only product that I use on my brows 99.9% of the time. And as much as I do love it, I am hoping to try something new in 2022, so we'll see how that goes. I always do this. I forget to shave the tail of my brows first before I start applying any makeup. You don't have to do this step. For me, if I know I'm doing a more winged out look, I like to shave a tiny bit of the tail so that it's not connecting to my winged out liner or shadow or anything. It just gives a little bit more room for the eye makeup. And then here, I'm just cleaning up around my brows with a little bit of foundation. I'm using the tape today to get a clean line when doing my eyeshadow. You can also do this look without the tape if you have the right brushes and using the right techniques to be a little bit more precise, but I just find using the tape makes it quick and easy. For eyeshadow, I started off with the Catrice and Iman Bronzed AF eyeshadow palette and used the shade Sunset, and I applied it with a medium blender brush as a transition shade. Then the next palette I used is the CoverGirl True Naked eyeshadow palette in Chocoholic, and I'm starting off with this dark brown shade. I use the same medium blender brush to apply it, and I'm focusing it mostly on the outer V of my eyes and a little bit in the crease as well. I feel like the lighting wasn't the best because the brown is looking a little bit washed out, but I also did go in with a crease shader brush to build up the shade a bit more. Then jumping back into the Bronzed AF palette, I used the shade Mulholland Drive, which is just a black shadow, and I applied it using a rounded liner brush. And this is when the tape really comes in handy because I just applied the shadow right along the tape, and I did wing it out quite a bit and brought it in about halfway along my upper lash line.
Next, I used the e.l.f. Camo Concealer in the shade Tan Latte, and using a precision concealer brush, I focused it from the inner corner of my eye to the middle of the eyelid. Now, all the eyeshadow shades I'm using today are pretty basic and neutral, so this look can easily be replicated with whatever palettes or shadows you have at home to create a similar look. And then just going back into the Bronzed AF palette, I'm using the shade Fairfax, and I'm just going to use that to set the concealer I just applied. Then from the Chocoholic palette, I selected the shade on the far right, which is a sparkly cinnamon cherry shade, I would say, and I applied it from the center of my eyelid to the outer third of the lid. Then once again from the Chocoholic palette, I'm now going to use this shade, which is super shimmery, and I applied it just to the center of my eyelid. And then jumping back into the Chocoholic palette one last time, I'm now using this sparkly bronze shade, which actually looks more metallic than shimmery. And then I applied that to the inner corner of my eye. Moving on from the Chocoholic palette, I then whipped out this MAC Mineralized Skin Finish in Gold Deposit, and I applied it as a highlight under the arches of my brows. I also applied a little bit to the inner corner of my eyelid, but to be honest, I didn't love it, so I did add another shadow on top. For that, I'm going to be using my Burgundy palette from Maybelline, and I'm just using this yellow gold shade. It's really pretty, and I just put that in the inner third of my lid for now. Then for liner, I used the YSL Shocking False Lash Effect liner, and I really didn't want to use this because we were already using the black shadow, but it was just easier for me to use this to do a very small, thin line from just the inner corner to the middle of the lid where the black shadow begins. Then once that was done, I removed the tape and we have a nice clean line left over. Now I went back into the Burgundy palette once again just to use that same golden shade. I liked it so much that I brought it in further towards the center of the lid, and I'm so happy that I did that because I just think it looks a lot better, and I just really love golden shades on brown skin. Moving on to under the eyes, I started off by concealing first with the NARS Radiant Creamy Concealer in Amande. I like this one because it matches my skin tone, so I'm using it to conceal any darkness under my eyes. Then I use the CoverGirl Concealer in Warm Honey again, and this one is a few shades lighter than my skin tone, and I use it to brighten and lift. So I just applied it under the wing up to my temples to help lift the eye, and then in the inner corner to brighten. Then to set all of that into place, I use the Maybelline Fit Me Loose Finishing Powder in 35 Deep, and instead of applying it with a sponge, I just used a concealer brush. For my bottom lid, I first went back into the Chocoholic palette and I picked up the dark brown shade with a crease shader brush and applied it from the outer third to the center of the lid. Then I picked up the rounded liner brush I used earlier to apply Mulholland Drive, and I didn't put any additional product on it. I was just using whatever was remaining on the brush, and I added it to my lower lid. Now there was actually quite a bit of product on it, so I made sure to use the crease shader brush and blend it out really well. I also went back into the burgundy palette once again and applied that same yellow golden shade to my bottom lid and connected the shadow from the top and bottom lid in the inner corner of the eyes. I went back into the Chocoholic palette again and applied the dark brown shade on a medium blender brush and applied it above the crease in the inner corner of the lid just to help create a little bit more depth. I also went back into that cinnamon cherry shade and applied it on top as well. Finally, I curled my lashes before putting on some mascara, and for mascara, I used the Maybelline Falsies Volume Express Mascara. Now, I also did pop on some false lashes, but unfortunately, I have no idea which ones these are because they're not in their original packaging. I kind of just dump all my used lashes together in one container. So I think that they're the Ardell Demi Wispies, but if not, the style is very similar to those lashes. But once that's done, we are finally done with the eyes, and I did my second eye off camera, of course. Now, the first step to finishing the rest of the face is priming. The primer that I used is the Marula Primer by Georgette Klinger, and I applied it all over my face, but I especially focused on pressing the product onto my larger pores and smile lines. I also color corrected the darker pigmentation around my mouth with a little orange color corrector before applying foundation. For foundation, I used the NARS Pure Radiant Tinted Moisturizer in Seychelles. Two things to note, this shade is discontinued under this name. You can now find it under the name Marrakesh. And the second thing is that I didn't even realize at first that this was a tinted moisturizer. I'm guessing most people would want a full coverage foundation on a night out for New Year's Eve. Once I realized, I did add my everyday foundation, which is the Maybelline Fit Me in 330 Toffee. And this is a good foundation for both everyday use as well as a night out because it is a buildable foundation. Then for contour, I always use my L'Oreal Shaping Stick Foundation in 420 Chestnut, and I applied it under my cheekbones, around my forehead, and under my jawline. Then to set the foundation, I used the Maybelline Fit Me Loose Finishing Powder in 35 Deep, and I like to apply quite a bit of powder and press the foundation into place because, as I mentioned, I get very oily very easily. And then to set my contour, I use the MAC Studio Water Weight Press Powder in Dark Deep, and I usually just use the darker side. Then for blush, I used my NYX Sweet Cheeks blush in the shade Totally Chill and applied that high up on my cheekbones, and I also like to put a little bit on my temples as well as on my forehead. I also ended up highlighting my cheekbones and temples again with the MAC Mineralized Skin Finish in Gold Deposit. I don't usually highlight my face like this, but for something like New Year's Eve, I like to kick on the makeup because why not? Then for the lips, I first lined them with the YSL Lip Styler in Gradation Black, and this is a really beautiful deep burgundy shade. Then on top of that, I use the NYX Pinup Pout lipstick in the shade True Vixen, which I think is a really good match for the lip liner I used, but I did feel like my lips were a bit too dark. So on top of that, I added the Beauty Glaze Matte Liquid Lipstick in the shade Leo, which is a really nice rich red shade, so it helped balance out the lip look really nicely. And I actually really love this lip combo, and I'll be using it a lot more in the future. To finally finish off the makeup, I use the NYX Matte Finish Setting Spray, and this is going to ensure that your makeup lasts all night long, especially on New Year's Eve. It's usually a long, late night, so this will really help ensure your makeup lasts a little bit longer. But there we have it. That is the finished makeup look.
So there you have it. This is the final makeup look. I really hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please make sure you leave it a like. And if you want to see more from me, make sure you're subscribed. Other than that, I really hope you have a happy and safe new year. And hopefully I'll catch you in the next video. Thanks for watching. Bye.